We continue all month long here on Ravens Rundown with our sub battle with Bengals breakdown as we want to prove why we have the best fans, not just in the AFC North, but across the National Football League. And this sub battle, it is heating up as we are coming down to the home stretch here in the month of May. Bengals with a slight lead at 169. We're at 155. Let's take it to them, show who's boss, and win this sub battle this month. For the latest happenings in your Baltimore Ravens, all offseason long with daily news and rumors. We're also talking trades, free agency, counting you down to training camp and more. We got you covered each and every day on Ravens Rundown. Subscribe now for free, and we'll get started with today's show. Glad to have you with us here on the channel. Tyler Jones here as we are talking surprise cut candidates for your Baltimore Ravens. I got 5 players that the Baltimore Ravens could shock the world and potentially move on from with the post-June 1 cuts approaching here in the next few weeks. The Ravens find themselves in need of some cash at this point. They don't have a ton of cap space, just $5.6 million to spend. And we told you within the last week or so that the Ravens have been rumored, the rumblings are that they could have a late push when it comes to adding some free agents here over the next few weeks. So with that in mind, they're going to have to find some money to be able to do so. If the Ravens were to move on from all 5 players that we discussed today, that would free up a total of $33.57 million. Nearly $34 million could be freed up if they were to make these moves. Now, let me say, before we go over this list of players, just kind of preface this ahead of time. We are saying the Ravens could do this and save some money. We are not advising that the Ravens do all of the following cuts. Make that very clear. All right? So before you go after my throat and try to rip me to shreds because I suggested this, I'm going to make that point very clear. Let's begin with Mark Andrews, who I'll just say right away, I would not cut Mark Andrews, but it's being discussed. It's something that's been talked about. With the emergence of Isaiah Likely, with Mark Andrews coming off a year where he was injury-riddled, there could be a time where the Ravens potentially move on from Mark Andrews in the very near future. I don't think that time is now, but if they were to do so, you're looking at saving about $11 million against the cap and taking on about a dead cap hit of $5.9 million. Now, I'll say this. I think it's best for the Baltimore Ravens to keep Mark Andrews around and really use that 12 personnel to your advantage with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely on the field at the same time together, something that they haven't really done the last 2 seasons. That's what I'd like to see. But if they do decide that they want to move on from Mark Andrews, I think that you could at least trade him and get something out of him. You don't have to straight up cut him, but that is a possibility. So let's ask you, should the Ravens cut Mark Andrews? What? Let me know what you think. HY for hell yes, HN for hell no, if it's time for Baltimore to move on from their star tight end. Next up, we find Marlon Humphrey on this list. Marlon Humphrey was very injured throughout much of last season as he was in and out, and that opened an opportunity for Brandon Stevens to step into the fold. He did a pretty solid job. You also saw the Ravens take not 1 but 2 corners in this year's draft. Nate Wiggins from Clemson, TJ Tampa from Iowa State. Both those guys are expected to get significant playing time, particularly Wiggins, with Wiggins competing for one of those starting outside corner spots. Does that mean Marlon Humphrey's the odd man out potentially? The cap savings on Humphrey is near $12 million with a dead cap hit of just above $11 million that you would potentially be taking on if you're to move on from Marlon Humphrey. I think the more likely scenario is a restructuring with Marlon Humphrey here. He's already restructured once before. I could see a restructuring where you say, look, Marlon, we want to keep you around. We're not ready to move on from you, but your money we need to move some cash to be able to get some other assets, some other pieces involved here. That's where I see the most likely situation being with Marlon Humphrey. Watch out for a restructure, not necessarily a straight-up cut. Justice Hill, the Ravens running back room, starting to get a little crowded for good reason. Keaton Mitchell had a very good rookie season last year, the UDFA out of East Carolina, but he's not expected to be healthy when the season begins. Obviously, you brought in Derrick Henry, who's going to be your starting running back from the Tennessee Titans, one of the best running backs in all of football. And then you drafted Rasheen Ali out of Marshall with a day 3 selection. He's expected to be a very good back. So where does that leave Justice Hill in all this here? Justice Hill, I think, comes back, but I'm not going to lose sleep if the Ravens decide, you know what, it's best for this team to go ahead and move on from Justice Hill and look for other options. You could save about $2.5 million from cutting Justice Hill. So not a ton of money you're saving, but at least enough money to go sign a veteran at another position. If you need to do this, you can. And I don't think losing Justice Hill is going to make or break your season, if you will. What I would say this, though, is that we have seen this Ravens team over the last couple of seasons has had the worst luck when it comes to injuries at the running back position. And with Keaton Mitchell already banged up as is, Justice Hill, I think, would be good to keep around just in case, God forbid, something happens to Derrick Henry, something happens to Rasheen Ali. Very well could be Justice Hill's the number 4 running back on the depth chart when the season begins. That's certainly possible. But with the way we've seen injuries go, might be best to go ahead and hang on to him just in case to have a backup option there. The dead cap hit you're looking at is about $500,000 is all would count against the cap if you do move on from Justice Hill. Let's ask you, will the Ravens keep Justice Hill? Is justice served? Be Judge Joe Brown in the comments section. Let us know what you think. Type Y for yes, N for no. You make the call. Will the Ravens keep Justice Hill or not? Let us know what you think. Another one is Patrick Ricard at the fullback position. I think Ricard's been fantastic. He's been the best fullback in the NFL for a number of years now. But we saw last year that this Todd Monken offense didn't really use the fullback that often, that they got to get creative to find ways to get Patrick Ricard on the football field. So this could be a elimination of sorts where you say, look, we just don't need you anymore with how our offense shapes out, because there's a lot of money you could save. $4 million on a fullback. I would prefer personally to restructure Patrick Ricard simply to say to him, look, Patrick, you're not needed the way you were before. We don't want you to leave, but we can't take on a $4 million cap hit. Can we find a way to restructure with Patrick Ricard? Because that's a lot of money. The dead cap hit, if you do decide to cut Patrick Ricard, is around $1.155 million. So not a ton that you'd be taking on there if you decide to move on from Patrick Ricard. The last player on this list, Patrick Mekari at the offensive tackle position. And it's interesting because we're likely to see Roger Rosengarten, the second-round pick out of Washington, be the Ravens' starting right tackle this year with Ronnie Stanley on the other side. So that leaves Mekari as the odd man out in the equation, unlikely to start for Baltimore at one of those offensive tackle positions. And so with that in mind, although he's a nice depth piece to have, is it worth the idea of counting towards $4.35 million against the cap? I lean not. I think this one makes sense to make a potential cut here for the Baltimore Ravens to save some cash. You do take on a dead cap hit of $2 million, so something to think about there. Is it worth it for you? But that's still a decent chunk of change for a backup offensive tackle in that sense. So we'll see what the Ravens do. Who's a player the Ravens should cut? We've gone over 5 potential cut candidates for your Baltimore Ravens, whether it's somebody we talked about today or somebody we didn't talk about today. Be the tough judge. Get that comment section. Let me know somebody the Ravens should move on from. Thanks for joining us here on this edition of a Ravens Rundown. As always, you need to subscribe to the channel. Stay up to date what's happening with your favorite team all off-season long. Doesn't cost you a thing. Absolutely 100% free. Subscribe now, youtube.com/RavensTV. Tyler Jones here. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time right here on Ravens Rundown.